Good morning, and welcome to Middlesex County and the Human Services Advisory Committee's Housing Policy Summit. For those who don't know me, my name's Megan Davey. I'm the Department Head of Community Services for Middlesex County, and I'll be your MC for today. We're here to learn more about the recently signed affordable housing legislation and to identify the tools which it provides our communities to create more affordable housing opportunity. An event like this is crucial because it gives us the opportunity to coordinate and communicate with our partners across the community, local governments, nonprofit agencies, and advocates for the betterment of all. I'd also like to recognize Middlesex College for hosting us today and extend thanks to the Board of Trustees and President McCormick for their hospitality. I also want to thank County Commissioner Koppel for being here today. We are grateful to our many partners. With that, I'd like to welcome Middlesex County Commissioner Director Ronald Rios.
Wow, when I ask my wife to be quiet, she doesn't listen. Only kidding. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us for today's Human Services Advisory Council Housing Policy Summit. Your presence underscores the urgency and significance of the issues we face, especially as we navigate the new laws implications that will shape the future of our communities and the state's approach to affordable housing. As a nation, we are facing one of the worst housing crises in modern history, one that grows more serious by the day. Here in New Jersey, the numbers are staggering. In 2022 alone, there was a shortage of more than 214,000 affordable rental homes available to low-income renters. This gap is not just a statistic. It represents the thousands of families struggling to find secure housing. And the number of our residents navigating housing insecurity is only increasing. This is not a problem that we can afford to ignore. As rent and home prices soar beyond what middle-income families can afford, the ripple effects are felt across our communities. This crisis not only affects our residents' confidence in the economy, but also forces many into difficult decisions, such as sacrificing essential needs like healthy food, health care, and education to pay for rent. This is a situation that no one should have to face, and it is our collective responsibility to address it. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to local officials, legislative leaders, housing advocates, and organizations who have joined us today. Your commitment and collaboration are crucial as we work to understand the new affordable housing regulations better and explore the best practices that will enable us to better serve our communities. This summit is instrumental to those efforts. As a county, we understand the importance of bringing together leaders, experts, and advocates to find real solutions. Through these partnerships and open dialogues, we can make a meaningful impact. We must seize this opportunity to strengthen our strategies, enhance our policies, and ensure that every resident has access to safe, affordable housing. Again, thank you for being here today and for your unwavering dedication to this cause. Together, we can make a difference, a positive difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Rios. Next, I'd like to welcome the Chair of the Human Services Advisory Council, Robert LaForgia, and Commissioner Clary Ascona-Barber. They were unable to attend today, but wanted to welcome you all.
Good morning, and welcome to the Middlesex County Human Services Advisory Council Housing Policy Summit. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Robert LaForgia. I'm the manager for Healthier Middlesex, the partnership between St. Peter's and Robert Wood Johnson University Hospitals in New Brunswick, and chair of the Human Services Advisory Council of Middlesex County. I'm sorry I can't be with you there today, but as chair of the Human Services Advisory Council, it is my pleasure to have this opportunity to address you all. The Human Services Advisory Council works closely with the state of New Jersey and Middlesex County to make recommendations for the allocation of funds and to monitor and advocate on the behalf of the needs and concerns of county residents. Today's Housing Policy Summit was organized as an opportunity to understand the landscape of housing in New Jersey and to discuss the important updates on the process by which affordable housing obligations are calculated and settled in municipalities throughout our state. Access to safe and affordable housing is one of the most important needs in our county. At today's conference, it is my hope that you all leave with an understanding of the new law and its practical applications. On behalf of the Human Services Advisory Council, I thank you all for making the time to be here for today's summit. Thank you and have a great day.
Good morning and welcome to the Human Services Advisory Council Housing Policy Summit. I'm sorry I cannot join you in person. I want to thank the organizers for bringing together such a dedicated group of individuals. So many people in our county and across the United States are struggling. Having a safe place to call home is a basic need, and your work is making a difference for those families and individuals who need a helping hand. Today's summit offers an opportunity to learn more about New Jersey's new affordable housing law, the state's most significant housing legislation in 40 years. Under the new law, municipalities must meet new benchmarks for affordable housing, which will require the construction of new homes. Middlesex County is committed to collaborating, sharing resources, and building stronger relationships that benefit the residents of our county. On behalf of the entire Board of County Commissioners, thank you again for being here today. I also want to thank the Human Service Advisory Council for the important work they do for our residents in need. Thank you.
It is now my honor to introduce Assemblywoman Yvonne Lopez of the 19th Legislative District and primary sponsor of the new affordable housing legislation.
Wow, what a crowd here today. Good morning, everyone. I'm encouraged to see so many people here today for what I hope will be a productive series of conversations and presentations on the housing policy in New Jersey. Let me begin by recognizing the dynamic leadership of Commissioner Director Ron Rios, Commissioner Barber, and the Middlesex County Human Services Advisory Council in organizing this morning's very important summit. Whether you are a housing advocate, a municipal leader, or a developer, you're here today because you realize the importance of housing policy in our state and understand the housing affordability issues we are having here in the state of New Jersey. After years of inaction, we're thousands of units in our housing goals, behind in our housing goals, facing an incredibly competitive housing market and seeing our residents struggle to find a place to call home. Although these problems exist, I am proud that the leaders in this room are working diligently to address these issues and put us in a better path forward towards our shared goal of housing for all. Today, you'll learn more about the state of affordable housing, including the obstacles that exist, the financing available, and best practices for success in building of more affordable housing. You'll also learn more about A4, law I sponsored ahead of the 4th round to govern the process by which municipalities calculate, settle, and ultimately implement their affordable housing obligations. A4 was the product of a lot of discussion in partnership with many of you in the room here today, and promises to provide efficiency, transparency, and uniformity towards meeting municipal affordable housing obligation for decades to come. It's clear we will be covering a lot in today's summit, but the bottom line is that these conversations are important, and the policies discussed here will make a difference for New Jersey families. When we discuss housing policy, it is important to remember that a house is much more than 4 walls and a roof. It is a place where cherished memories are made, an asset that creates generational wealth, and a structure upon which a great quality of life can be built. Thank you for being amazing partners in the work here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Lopez, for your advocacy on this important issue. Today's event will include multiple presentations and a panel discussion, all featuring leaders in the affordable housing space. These are the very people who work day to day assisting constituents, developing new housing opportunities, and identifying the resources needed for our underserved communities. We have a robust agenda and a lot to get through, but we wanted to make sure you have the opportunity to ask questions. If you have questions pertaining to any of the speakers today, the agenda on your tables has a QR code, so feel free to send your questions through our form, and we'll address those questions subsequent to today's presentations. So now I'd like to introduce for our first presenter, who will share an overview of the new affordable housing law. Juan Carlos Nordello is the Chief of Staff to Assemblywoman Lopez and has the knowledge to provide an in-depth analysis and breakdown of the law. Juan Carlos?
Hello, everyone. Good morning. So I'm going to lead you through a 75-page bill. I'm going to do my best to summarize it in a way that's palatable for everyone, but I will make myself available for questions towards the end. And like I said, it's a matter of public record. It's a truly transformational piece of legislation that we think, especially through the Assemblywoman's leadership, will change the landscape of housing policy in New Jersey. All right, there's some slides missing, but that's okay. So just very basic premise of Affordable Housing 101. So the Mount Laurel Doctrine is what stipulates that every single municipality in the state of New Jersey has a constitutional mandate to provide its fair share and reasonable share of affordable housing in New Jersey. So that's what sort of governs the system. The Council on Affordable Housing was established in 1985 as the entity, the administrative entity to oversee affordable housing obligations in the state. And that entity, in a 10-year round, which is supposed to occur, did not produce any housing since 1985. So 30 years of inefficiency and endless bureaucracy led to very little units actually being constructed within the state. This bill formally abolished the Council on Affordable Housing and created a pathway that's more efficient and uniform for the production of units. It's also important to note that a round of affordable housing is 10 years. So when we start with what does A4 do? So it eliminates the Council on Affordable Housing and the court-led system that a lot of municipalities suffered through protracted and lengthy legal battles that really didn't result in any housing being built for residents. It creates an efficient, transparent, and uniform process for municipalities to calculate and settle their municipal housing obligations in this next round. More importantly, This is just fun. This is going to happen to me, guys. So I'm just getting rid of all the kinks before the presenters come up. We're good? So it empowers municipalities with more negotiating power, and that was really a sticking point of the legislation. We wanted to make sure that our municipal actors were empowered throughout this process. They're important partners, obviously, and Middlesex County has done an especially good job when it comes to the affordable housing landscape. So there's a lot of incentives and a lot of empowerment for municipalities throughout this process. And it also developed a comprehensive timeline for municipalities to adhere to in order to meet their constitutional obligations. As you'll see through the timeline contemplated in this round, the next round starts in 2025. We're endeavoring that by 2026, municipalities will have their final fair share plans and housing elements submitted to the state so that we can really use that remaining time in the round to construct the hundreds of thousands of units that we need in the state of New Jersey to meet our affordable housing obligation goals. So the big question is, what's my determination, what's my number for a municipality? Previously, that was led through a court-driven process that a lot of people couldn't agree on a statutory formula. They used Supreme Court decisions to make their determination. We've changed all that in A4. So prior to each new round of affordable housing, they will use the statutory formula that is stipulated in A4. This formula takes into account nuances of municipalities, regional and prospective need, and provides everyone an even playing field as to how a determination is to be calculated, as opposed to arguing about methodology. So we've established this formula in statute. Currently, as it exists, the Department of Community Affairs will use the statutory formula, and they will run the numbers throughout the state. So for the municipalities or municipal representatives in the audience, they will publish the results of their formula, and they will make that publicly available to be utilized as non-binding guidance. That means that a municipality can look at the calculations that have been presented and see what the state came up with as their need. They don't need to utilize the number that the state came up with, but it does give them a pretty concrete guideline as to what their determination might be, since everyone is going to be using the same formula. Now, the formula that is created by A4, as I said, it handles regional need, present need obligations, and municipal prospective need obligations. Again, it's very complicated, but it's based on the decennial census and other data sets and households information that comes from a regional perspective and also drives down to your individual municipality. And especially for the municipal portion, it gives a lot of flexibility for the nuance of your municipalities. If you're a dense municipality, you don't have a lot of available land. If you have a lot of deficient units, it really tries to capture the dynamics of your community in a fair way. And it's really spelled out throughout the legislation. It would take me 2 hours to really dive in and explain that thoroughly to all of you, but again, it is pretty spelled out, and your professional planners and housing personnel in your offices should be able to utilize this formula. The next phase of the legislation is the settlement process. So municipalities may be familiar with individuals or external interested parties challenging their determinations or their individual housing elements and fair share plans. This process really, we try to simplify it in this legislation, and it starts at the forefront with the establishment of the Affordable Housing Dispute Resolution Board, which already has been appointed through our timeline by the Administrative Office of the Courts. So the program's role is to efficiently entertain challenges and mediate any resolutions towards challenges of a municipality's determination and ultimately a municipality's fair share plan and housing element. The program consists of 7 members appointed by the Administrative Director of the Courts, which, as I had mentioned, have already been appointed. And these individuals are previous Mount Laurel judges or individuals of comparable expertise. The legislation also appropriates $16 million to fund their staff, so they'll have a robust staff that are working with municipalities and interested parties to settle any disputes that may occur. The program, as I had mentioned, is charged with developing the procedures for settlement, and they'll be the overseer of these arrangements. So when you have your determination finally settled under the statutory formula, the municipality will establish that determination via resolution in their own municipality, in their own process. And once you have a determination, there is a challenge and settlement procedure process that begins. So you'll present your number publicly, and any interested party will be able to challenge that number under a very specific set of criteria. It's important to note that municipalities have the presumption of validity when presenting their number, which is a pretty powerful tool for municipalities that are in the audience. That means that you're presumed to have done this work correctly, and that your number is not capricious or not in line with the legislation. An interested party can challenge your number once it's vetted through an objective assessment standard by the program, which means that we're trying to weed out frivolous challenges to municipalities' determination. That's just going to really gunk up the process, and it's incredibly inefficient if a lot of frivolous challenges are accepted. So the program will be charged with making sure that challenges are based on non-compliance with the formula that's been set forward or any other real information. The interested party also has to provide evidence, their homework, if you will, to the Affordable Housing Dispute Resolution Program to ensure that the challenge is not frivolous in nature. Once those determinations are made, the program will render a decision. Either the municipality, their determination is valid and the challenge is rejected. The challenge is found to be valid and the municipality has an opportunity to revise their determination based on those findings, or the municipality can remain recalcitrant. At that point, they lose the immunity and the privileges that are provided to them throughout the legislation. So it's important to note there's a section here, but there's a lot of incentives for municipalities to be good actors in this space, but there are consequences as well if municipalities are not good actors. So in this, I'm the mayor of the municipality that I'm talking about in this fake scenario. So I've settled my determination. I now have my number. I've overcome any challenges that have occurred. And now I'm in the phase of creating my fair share plan and housing element. A lot of municipalities have experience in creating fair share plans and housing elements. It's a laborious process that is conducted by your professionals. So under the legislation, you would find similar processes as you have undertaken before in previous rounds to create your fair share plan and housing elements. There's a challenge process, again, that does exist for that plan, but the important part of this, and I think it's the most important bullet, is there's going to be an analysis that has to be conducted of whether or not the municipality has met its prior round obligation. So that means if you're entering this round, in the fourth round, you can either enter with excess credits, meaning that you've met some of your obligations and you're walking in with points, or you have units that are deficient, and that will count on top of the new determination that you have. So it's, again, all the kinks are being worked out right now. As I said, you'll contend and you'll realize whether or not you have unfulfilled prior round credits or whether you're entering the new round with things that you have to contend with. Now we're moving into the settlement phase of the fair share plan and housing element. So similar to the process that's been undertaken for the calculation, interested parties will have the availability and the opportunity to challenge a municipality's fair share plan and housing element. Under very specific criteria, the program will still administer the same objective assessment standard to weed out frivolous challenges, but interested parties will have to challenge your plans and housing elements based on any violation that they find to the Fair Housing Act or the Mount Laurel Doctrine. They'll have to provide with specificity and particularity how they came to the grounds of that challenge, and then it'll be up to the program to make a determination whether the challenge is valid. Again, there are a number of pathways that a municipality can take at this point, but if the program does find that a challenge is valid, they'll have to work with the municipality to mediate a dispute in which the municipality will either alter their fair share plan and housing element to address the challenge that has been provided. And all of this is really based on the municipality making a reasonable effort to have this housing accessible. You know, we don't want municipalities building housing on a swamp, for example, if that's part of the plan. So these are all the sort of the nuances that'll be handled in the settlement process for the fair share plan and housing element. And again, the program is in charge of mediating these disputes and resolutions. Again, if a municipality and interested party cannot come to an agreement, there will be a consequence to that depending on who's acting in bad faith or good faith. But if it's the municipality, there'll be the revocation of immunity from exclusionary zoning litigation, which is a pretty powerful stick and consequence in this process. But essentially, it's the same exact process. There's a challenge period where interested parties have time. I will mention they have to adhere to the deadline that is contemplated in the legislation. There are deadlines all over the place. You'll see in the next slide for both municipalities and interested parties, and consequences towards the failure to meet those deadlines. But this is how the Affordable Housing Dispute Resolution Program will settle your final fair share plans and housing elements. This is the timeline that's contemplated by A4. Hopefully we can make these slides available to our municipal actors. It's a lot to cover. It's a 26-month timeline. We're currently on track. So right now, DCA is utilizing the statutory formula to calculate the need throughout the state and the obligations and non-binding guidance that I had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. But essentially, in 2026, the goal is to have all of the municipalities that have to deliver upon their municipal affordable housing goals to have their final fair share plans and housing elements prepared, submitted, and ready for building. It's an ambitious deadline. Our municipal partners reminded of that, the Assemblywoman and I of that constantly. But within the legislation, there are plenty of opportunities for municipalities to receive extensions based on circumstances that are reasonable and good faith efforts. So we really have tried our best to incentivize our municipal partners to work within the bounds of the timeline that's been contemplated. This is the incentive section for municipalities. It's extensive, as you can see, and we hope that our municipal partners appreciated the work that we did to ensure that there were plenty of incentives for municipalities. So when we're starting from the top, we now have a statutory formula to calculate determinations, which is big. Again, there's no argument now over what formula they're using. Everyone's using a standard formula to calculate their determination. We are receiving, the municipalities that comply with the legislation are receiving immunity from all exclusionary zoning litigation, including builder's remedy, which is pretty important. And it's a dire consequence when a builder's remedy lawsuit is levied on a municipality. So that immunity is key to the legislation as an incentive. As I mentioned, the deadlines that are contemplating the legislation have plenty of extensions available for municipalities that undergo changes due to reasonable circumstances. Municipalities can also request a realistic opportunity review in the midpoint of the round, which allows them to make alternative sites to their housing elements and plans to ensure that they're able to meet the need adequately. So that's another game changer for municipal actors. Municipalities are avoiding the court system that's been so protracted and lengthy and inefficient, frankly, and costly to municipalities. So we're trying to keep municipalities out of court, and we're trying to get them to settle their obligations through this dispute resolution program. Additionally, there's a 1,000-unit cap for any new determination or 20% of your housing stock. So there is a limit as to what the determination can be. Yet another protection. On the challenge process, municipalities' fair share plans and housing elements cannot be challenged on the basis of a real property claim. So you can't have a developer that's challenging your fair share plan because they want you to use their site over the site that you have picked. Yet another really important, I think our municipal partners in the room know how important that is when a developer is trying to challenge on that sole basis. And there are a host of bonus credits that municipalities can now utilize to meet their obligation. So plenty of incentives, as I had mentioned, within the legislation for our municipal partners. The Assemblywoman worked hard with the League of Municipalities, the Conference of Mayors, and municipal leaders across the state to really drive up incentives for this legislation. Now, the penalties that exist within the legislation, recalcitrant municipalities, and there are some of them that fail to meet the deadlines contemplated by the legislation, will lose their immunity from builder's remedy and exclusionary zoning litigation. And once their immunity is revoked, they will have to handle their obligation in court, which is a system that's way different than the one that's designed in A4. That's a system that a lot of municipalities are used to, and it's very protracted. Obviously, you cannot use your affordable housing trust fund dollars to defend yourself in Superior Court if your immunity is revoked and you're sort of kicked out of this program. You'll have to use taxpayer dollars or whatever other funds to defend yourself in court. Fee shifting will occur to the prevailing party, and your determination will be determined by a court process, not by the Affordable Housing Dispute Resolution Program. So pretty significant consequence for municipalities that choose not to work within the bounds of A4. It's a very big slide. So the policy, the bonus credits that I had mentioned exist. So municipalities are used to utilizing bonus credits to meet their obligation. We have provided a whole host of new bonus credits within the legislation. Some of the more important ones that are relevant to today's conversation are 2.5 bonus credits for individuals that are working with nonprofit developers and sweat equity partnerships. So there are nonprofit developers in the room. There are going to be plenty of nonprofit developers on our panel discussion today. So it's important that municipalities work with nonprofit developers to meet their obligations, and there is an incentive to do so. Age-restricted housing, transitional housing, whole host of bonus credits that will allow you to meet your obligation and really try to work within the bounds of A4, so yet other incentives there. We're also updating the Uniform Housing Affordability Code and changing deed restrictions. So for new for-sale units, it'll be 30 years. For rental units, it'll be 40 years. Though that 30-year deed restriction will make sure that these housing units are affordable for a longer period of time, and again, helping us meet our shared affordable housing goals to make sure that everyone has decent access to affordable housing. So, this presentation will be made available to you, but the bonus credits are spelled out within the legislation and contemplated as such. And again, we think that these are incentives for our municipal partners. Final slide, everyone. So the additional policy that's being impacted by A4. DCA will now provide some transparency as it relates to Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars. So your municipality's balances will be posted and available publicly. There will also be information on non-residential and residential development fees that are collected and expended and how they're utilized, and the start and expiration dates of deed restrictions. I think that's especially important for the advocate community. It's very difficult to know when deed restrictions and those covenants have ended and when they haven't, so having that information publicly available lends itself to more transparency on the stock that's available in housing. Additionally, we are amending various references to the Council on Affordable Housing since we are abolishing it formally in statute. So you'll see that throughout the legislation, and we're transferring that rulemaking authority to the Department of Community Affairs and our friends at HMFA for certain parts of the legislation as well. There's also certification and compliance enforcement process through administrative agents. That's a new process that's within legislation. And I'd mention at the end, there's an appropriation to ensure that all of these things are funded and working smoothly. That's the last slide, but essentially, it's a uniform, comprehensive, and cohesive process that we think will help municipalities and interested parties and all the stakeholders in this room really get at our shortage in affordable housing stock that we have throughout the state by creating a timeline that's predictable and a process that's predictable as well. This will help municipalities to meet their goals, to avoid court, to avoid sort of that endless cycle of bureaucracy, and to build the units that we need. I think fundamentally, Assemblywoman and the prime sponsors believe that it's important for municipalities. They're our most important partner in all of this, and we wanted to give them the tools to do the right thing and to be in a predictive process where they're empowered and given negotiating capacity and ability. But again, it's about building the units that we need in a very expeditious timeline, and hopefully this next round in New Jersey will be the most productive yet. So thank you for your time, and I'll be available for questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Juan Carlos. And as Juan Carlos said, these presentations will be available to you after the event. So our next presenter is from Fair Share Housing, so please help me welcome Reverend Eric Dobson, Senior Special Advisor.
I'm assuming that that light clap is just because it's so early and all of us got up so early and we're still tired and half asleep. But thank you all this morning. I'm gonna try to wake us up a little bit. Not that Juan's presentation wasn't great, because it was. Let's give him another hand. And I got to tell you, Juan worked so hard on this legislation. He's an amazing young man who's done incredible, smart and brilliant, who put this together. And Assemblywoman Lopez and the work that she's done to get, and Speaker Coughlin, to get us to where we are today. I got to tell you, one of the things that is so unique about being in Middlesex County, just for a moment, indulge me for a moment. Just look around the room. Look who's sitting next to you. Look around. What do you see? Absolutely, diversity. This is what the Mount Laurel Doctrine is all about. That's what it's always have been about. That's what Fair Share Housing Center is about. And that's what I'm about. How do we create racial, economic, and social integration? That's the meaning of my life. You know, I say this all the time, and those who've heard me speak before may have heard me use this quote by Mark Twain. The two most important days in a person's life is the day they're born and the day they find out why. My why is to create racial, socioeconomic, and religious integration, so we all can have a safe, decent place to live, to raise our kids. I'm astounded by the fact that folks who oppose affordable housing, when they themselves want a home that is safe, decent, and affordable. Like that's astounding to me. So this piece of legislation is not only historic for New Jersey, it's historic in the country. There is no other piece of legislation this comprehensive to get us to a place where we need to be in New Jersey, because we are so far behind, over 200,000 units behind on affordable housing. And guess what? We all know that, right? If you don't know that, go try to buy a house in New Jersey. You'll quickly find how expensive it is. And it is just as simple as supply and demand. You underproduce market rate housing, you underproduce affordable housing, the cost of housing goes up. It's that simple. So this is what we're doing today, and what you all, and by the way, give yourselves, all the officials from Middlesex County, give yourself residents, workers, affordable housing builders, give yourselves a hand, because Middlesex County was the first county, before we made this legislation, was the first county in the entire state that Fair Share Housing Center had settlements with every town in Middlesex County. That's amazing. Damn, y'all ain't saying that. Now listen, we negotiate with over 300 towns in the state of New Jersey, but this county was the first county that every town had agreed to meet its obligation. That's incredible. Yes. Look, next year we're celebrating 50 years, and it's been a 50-year fight. And for me to stand up here and say that to you all, that's pretty impressive. So you are impressive. So let me talk a little bit so I can get out of here, get out of your way, because I think one of the things that we have to understand when we're talking about advocacy and action, right? We always forget that sometimes that it is really a historical thing. We have to look at history to get us where we're going to the future. Historically, this is the thing that in this country that we forget. Whenever we have more major progressive moves, like in terms of moving people out of poverty into middle class, it has always been an agreement between labor, industry, and government. That's had always happened. Historically, the New Deal was when government, labor, and industry came together and say, let's take people out of poverty, because everybody was, now, let me say this. I'm gonna get in trouble today. Our country was okay when poor indigenous folks and Latino folks in this country, our ancestors was born here enslaved, but when black and brown folks were poor, our country was okay with that. But when the New Deal happened, when the market crashed, and when white people started being poor, they're like, oh, hell no, we got to do something about that. That's the truth, right? So we created the New Deal. The New Deal was a deal between labor, industry, and government. Unfortunately, it excluded minorities, right? So we ushered in this new housing program, this new housing platform, new housing to bring people out of poverty into the middle class, to the exclusion of black and brown folks, right? So when we talk about building affordable housing and having affordable housing and advocating for this, we always have to go back and look at history, that folks didn't get the opportunity to get into housing under the New Deal, because everybody talked about the New Deal. It was great. It was great for some people, not for all people. And so we need to remember that history. How did we get here with all this shortage of housing? Because we excluded so many people. Up to today, let's move up to today, when we had the Mount Laurel, or in the 70s, and we had the Mount Laurel Doctrine. It was the same thing. People were moving into opportunity. People were moving into opportunity. Let me say that one more time. People were moving into opportunity because the government had set it up that way. Do you hear me? Y'all quiet this morning. The government has set it up that way. I often say this because this is sometimes we forget that all of us live in affordable housing. How many have a mortgage? Your mortgage is subsidized by who? By the government. It's the same money, whether you believe it or not, it's the same money. Your mortgage is backed by a bank or mortgage company, which is backed by a government, like by our government. So we all live in affordable housing. We all get subsidies. Some of us get what we call entitlements, and some of us get subsidies. Now, Dr. King said the poor get capitalism, the rich get socialism, because the subsidies that are going toward the most wealthiest parts of this nation is way more than the subsidies that go to poor people. Y'all sleepy this morning. Okay, let me move on. So historically, housing has been the pathway for us to grow into the middle class. And again, some of us were excluded. That's why the Mount Laurel Doctrine came about, because when Ethel Lawrence wanted to stay in Mount Laurel, that local government in Mount Laurel said, no, if you people can't afford to live here, you just have to leave. So moving all the way up to now, all these court battles and fighting through, and we finally got to a piece of legislation that will change the course of history in New Jersey being one of the most diverse states in the nation, but also the most segregated. So we're trying to move from segregated community to integrated communities, and that only happens when we understand the law and we advocate for the right thing. And why is the right thing? Because guess what? It's the law. Did you guys realize that? It's the constitutional obligation. It's the law. So if you want to be anti-American and break the law, then go right ahead. You can join the January 6th, folks. But anyway, I love people who say they love America but chooses to break the law or try to find ways to undermine the law. But what this law does, it really brings us to a place where we can have recapture the opportunities that was excluded years ago. We have an opportunity in New Jersey to really build integrated communities. So it's about opportunities. And those opportunities, you know what I love about the word opportunity? Opportunities is unimaginable. You can create whatever you want to do when you look at an opportunity and there's nothing there, and you have, where are the developers? Any developers in the house? Any developers? All right, developers. I love developers. Dan Antoneas in Region 9 is one of my favorite people in the world, right? I love developers because you can create. We're all creators. You know, some of us don't understand that. We're all creators. I say this, whatever your faith is, the Creator created us to be creators. We all have the ability to create. We all have the ability to imagine what life could be, what our community can be, what can we build. My son, you know, I'm telling you, this is a shameless plug, but he don't need a shameless plug. Some of you know my son is on Broadway, and he was in Hadestown, my favorite Broadway show. Hadestown, it says the boy was amused. He chose to live in the world as it could be in spite of the way it is. Let me say that one more time. Choose to live in the world the way it could be in spite of the way it is. That sets up opportunities and creativity when people say, I don't want affordable housing in my community. I don't want to have all this density. You can create any type of housing under the Mount Laurel Doctrine you want. And that's where the advocacy and partnering with the opportunities to partner with your local community residents. Now, I think one of the things that we forget about when we talk about affordable housing, all the numbers, because we get caught up in all the numbers, what our number, what our obligation. We're talking about people. That's the fundamental issue is we're talking about people having a home to live in, whether they're renting it or they're owning it. We're talking about people. When you leave here today, when your day is over, when you come home from work, you go into a place of residence. Am I right? Unfortunately, some people don't. We have a homeless population in New Jersey that we really could solve this issue. If labor, industry, and government come together to build enough affordable housing to give everyone an opportunity, don't you? Like when you lay down at night and you cozy up in your bed and you had your late night snack, if you're like me, it's always a late night snack. There are thousands and thousands of people in New Jersey who don't have that opportunity. One of the most life-changing things that ever happened to me, because I was, I was one of those typical pastors, and some of you know me, I'm not a typical pastor anymore. I was one of those typical pastors that went to I'm going to wrap up in a minute. years ago, they were feeding the homeless on Martin Luther King birthday. You know, we all do our service work on Martin. How many do service work on Martin Luther King birthday? Everybody loves that, right? Dr. King probably would be appalled at what we do, but that's okay. So I was down in Philadelphia feeding the homeless, and I said, boy, this is great. And the lady who organized it, boy, I'm looking forward to do this next year. And the lady looked at me and she said, we do this every week. What you gonna do, Reverend? Every Sunday, we're down on the Parkway in Philadelphia. Rain, sleet, snow, shine. We do this every week. And I said, oh, God, I got to be in church. I got to lead the worship. How am I this? And she said, we meet here 7 o'clock in the morning for the next 8 years. Every Sunday morning, rain, sleet, snow, I fed the homeless, talked with them, met with them, heard their stories, drug addiction, mental illness, veterans, women, children. And it changed the course of my life. It led me to understand that at any given moment, the space between mental illness and what we call sanity, that line is so thin. You don't know what situation happening in your life that can break you mentally. And you find yourself in a situation where you're needing help and resources. That changed the course of my life, that I realized that everyone needs a home, that everyone needs services, that housing is and should be a human right. And we shouldn't be excluding anyone regardless of their situation. This is the education, the opportunities. This is what I'm talking about. Having a connection, being compassionate, understanding the humanity of people. That's why I want to destroy the concept of race. There's no such thing as race. As James Baldwin said, there's not a white person in America who can prove they're white. Because when your ancestors came here, you were French, you were Dutch, you were German, and you were poor. You didn't leave those European nations because you were doing well. They left there because it was horrible. So we got this notion that certain people shouldn't be in our communities because of their either ethnic background or their economic level. And do you know the most desirable neighborhoods throughout the country are the neighborhoods that are diverse economically, racially, and socially? Integrated communities. Because it spawns ingenuity, it spawns creativity. It taps into what we all was here to do, to meet and connect and grow and learn from each other. How can I learn about you if I don't embrace your culture, if I don't know who you are? If my perception of you is based upon what I learn on television or I learn from my parents? It is a very simple concept. Advocate for people getting to know each other in a world where we're so instant, right? I mean, my God. I cringe when I speak. Oh, I got so many friends on social. I don't really use social media. I know I have to get on it. But these are the same, I shouldn't say this stuff. These are the same social media posts when I see people all hugged up, they smiling, and then months later I get a call. Reverend Dobson, can me and my wife talk to you? Our marriage is falling apart. I say, God damn, I just saw you on social media. In vacation, and some of y'all look like y'all were in love. What is the point I'm saying? Like, people, we have to reconnect on a human level. I raised my kids in Pensacola, New Jersey. One of the most diverse communities in New Jersey at that time. We had 22 different languages in Pensacola. And my first wife was Italian, so my two biological kids are biracial. And I talk to them every day, all the time, about what it's like growing up biracial, what it was like growing up in Pensacola, what is it like being, going through a world being biracial. And they tell me, Dad, we are so thankful that we grew up in Pensacola, that it's not that we didn't see race, but we just saw, we connected with our friends. And so when I went to the high school graduation, it was like the UN. And my kids have friends from all different backgrounds. And they are prepared. My son is in Japan right now. doing a show, doing Rent, a production of in Japan. And they had friends from all different backgrounds. If you are living in a segregated community, let me tell you something, whether it's all segregated all white, segregated all black, whatever it is, you're putting your kids at a disadvantage. Because we live in a global society now where those who are multiracial, multi-ethnic, have friends from all different cultures who can react and interact with folks are the ones that are going to be at the advantage when our world, the next chapter of our world, when automation and stuff is happening, when jobs, if we don't get this thing together, this AI thing together. Yeah, that stuff scares me. I got to learn how to use it, but the point I'm trying to make is there are examples, and I'm wrapping up, I'm closing. There are examples where Middlesex County, you all have already taken the first step, but doing the right thing. Now you need to go further, connecting with people, having town meetings, having discussion about how do we engage, how do we build a community that is for everyone, no matter their ethnic background, their educational background, their economic background. And here's some examples that right here in New Jersey, towns who have done this well. Montclair has done it well. And now listen, integration is not static. It's not something you work on, then you stop. We have to continue this process. We have to continue to getting to know our neighbors and connecting with these folks. South Orange, Maplewood. You ever been to South Orange, Maplewood? Beautiful community, intentionally integrated community. Westmount area in Philadelphia. Anybody ever been to Philadelphia? Love Philadelphia. Born and raised, Philly through the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. And the home of the chief. Listen, anybody watching this? If you go to Philadelphia and you want a real cheesesteak, Geno's and Pat's is not a real cheesesteak. Okay? If someone put cheese whiz on your cheesesteak, run. We don't do that. Okay? Then there's Shaker Heights outside of Cleveland. Then there's Oak Park. Anybody ever been to Oak Park right outside of Chicago? Beautiful community, intentionally integrated. How they're developing, building housing. This is the most, and I met, if you're a kid, I met today Susan. Where's Susan? There she is. Susan Town Clock. Town Clock CDC took a church and converted that church in affordable housing, created space for worship and other opportunities in that building. This is the creativity we're talking about, right? How do we build a community where everyone can belong? And I'm gonna wrap up on this. I've seen so many opportunities. The other day I went to this housing tour, open house. Anybody ever go to open house? That's one of my favorite things. You guys go to open houses? Like when houses are going up for sale in your community, you should go. Like, go tour them, get design ideas, get the colors. Oh, I like that. Oh, I should do that. I went to this house. It was a big mansion. And what surprised me when I got there to view this house, because I was like, it's $400,000. Oh, God, that's a good deal. It's a big mansion. But actually, it was the first half of that house was $400,000. There was a 2-bedroom house. In that same building, it was just like a mansion. They had another house. So it was broken up to 4 separate homes in one house that looks like one big mansion, and it was beautiful. Again, the creativity. How do we build affordable housing? If you're opposed to real high-rise, take some of them big mansions that you got that's sitting there. Take some of the churches and develop multifamily housing in these buildings. And I'll wrap up with this saying, like, the 5 C's of community cohesion that I talk about. One is compassion. You got to have compassion. In order to build a cohesive community, you got to have compassion, right? Compassion for all the different folks who live in your community. 2 is you got to connect with people, right? Right? 3, you got to communicate with people, right? 4 is collaborating. When you're not collaborating on issues and projects and concerns or social issues in your community, then you have the tension that exists in our country today. We're so polarized by politics because we're not connecting on a human level. And the last thing is competition. Competition is good. Anybody watch the Olympics? Anybody watch the Olympics? I think I cried more at this Olympics than any other Olympics in history that I've seen. Part of it, I think, because I'm getting old. You know, you get older, you get more sensitive. I got 3 grandchildren now. And it was so amazing to see all these countries coming together, competing not out of anger and frustration, but competition. seeing that they train all their lives to compete with another athlete. Not that they're mad at them, but to see, I'm competing, I've trained, let's see who's good. Competition is good when it's done when we're talking about connecting on a human level. Advocacy around affordable housing and action is when people are connecting on a human level, understanding the needs of all of us as human beings. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dobson. And let's give a round of applause for Juan Carlos and Reverend Dobson. Amazing information provided. So we're going to take a short break, about 10 minutes, and then we'll reconvene. Thanks. So next up, we have a two-part presentation on the financing affordable housing in New Jersey. For this presentation, we'll hear about both state and county resources. For the state portion, it is my pleasure to introduce Jonathan Sterneski, the Director for Policy and External Affairs at the New Jersey Housing, Mortgage, and Finance Agency.
Sorry. Got to adjust it a little bit. All right. Well, it's good to see so many familiar faces. I want to just thank Juan Carlos and Assemblywoman Lopez and the Middlesex County Human Relations Council for inviting us here, although I will say I'm a little disappointed that they put me after Reverend Dobson, because that's just not fair. So I don't think I'll forgive them for that. So before we start on this, who's excited to undertake this process? Come on, guys. So, right. I know it's hard when we're looking at this situation, right? You're looking at kind of what has to be done, and there's a bit of a checklist here. You're going to have to build through. It's going to be an entire thing, but there's a lot of opportunity here. This is not just building housing. This is an opportunity to reassess all of what your plans are, to reassess how your town is built. You can take a look at what your town is today, and you can actually start to build out the plan for what your town is going to be over the next 50 years. Because as you look at these plans, the things that you start to build in, or when you plan for something in 2026, it'll probably be 2027, 2028, 2029 before it gets built. Those are going to be buildings that will be standing in your town for the next 30, 40, 50 years. This is a great opportunity to really take a deep look at where you are today and where you want your town to be over the next coming decades. So, as much as this is going to be, I think, a difficult process for everyone, you're going to have to navigate everything. We also do have to thank the Assemblywoman and her staff for not only advancing the legislation and being receptive to feedback and comments and really trying to work with all the stakeholders, because whether or not that bill passed, this process was going to start on July 1st, 2025 regardless. They've been able to really kind of clean up the process and give you more of a uniform way forward. So anyway, as introduced, my name is Jonathan Sterneski. I'm the Director of Policy and External Affairs at HMFA. I'm really happy and honored to be here with you today, partially because I love getting to talk about what we do at the agency, but also because this is so close to my house. I live like 6 miles from here, so this was a wonderful commute this morning. Before I start, I also just want to acknowledge that over at the table over there, we have our manager of marketing, Jesse Crawford, and thank you. And it's a slight plug, but Jesse is great. He does presentations for us all the time. So if you guys are having like town halls or other type of events where you want us to come present information, generally speaking, it's on our down payment assistance and our single family programs, which are able to help people access homeownership and make it, make homeownership more feasible for those that might otherwise be priced out of the market. We do entire presentations on that, and at least for the next few weeks until we find Jesse's, successor in his previous role, he'll be doing those. So if you want, come either speak to myself or Jesse, and we can certainly arrange to have those and come out and talk to your constituents and your residents. So that said, here we go, cool. So HMFA is the state, NJHMFA is the New Jersey Housing Mortgage Finance Agency, which is a mouthful. We are the New Jersey allocator of the federal low-income housing tax credit, and so we are tasked with increasing access to affordable housing throughout the state of New Jersey. Primarily, this occurs through our multifamily programs, which are, we do tax credit allocations, we have financing for construction and permanent loans, we finance special needs affordable housing, and then we also have, as I mentioned, our single-family programs, including making purchasing more viable for lower income and first-time home buyers. That said, but that, as much as I love talking about that, we're really here to talk about the multifamily side. So the biggest source for us is the low-income is LIHTC, which is the low-income housing tax credit. This is the single. This is widely acknowledged to be the single most effective tool in creating affordable housing in our nation's history. And so once units are created that are financed with LIHTC, those units are going to be restricted at 30% of the individual's income, and the incomes are restricted at 50, 60, or 80% of the area median income, depending on the depth of affordability, the location, and the unit size. They come in two forms. Primarily, we have the competitive 9% credit and the as of right 4% credit. The 9% covers about 70% of development costs, which I have some slides I'll show you about those. The 4% covers about 30%. These can be used for new construction or rehab. They are also, and they can be used, while we're primarily going to talk about fully affordable today just for the ease of explaining how this works, they can be used on fully affordable or mixed income, provided the mixed income meets certain criteria. So on a more granular level, the way this works is LIHTC is a dollar-for-dollar reduction of construction costs, basically. So when you have a market rate, fully market rate development, right over there, what winds up happening is the construction cost is pretty much fixed. To make that pencil out, the market rents have to meet the debt service over 30 years. So you can pretty much take your capital stack, you can look at it, you say, this is the cost, this is what we anticipate the rents are going to derive over this 30-year period. That should pay off the annual mortgage every year. We can service the debt. The problem you run into is that structure doesn't work when you're dealing with affordable housing, because by its very nature, it is restricted rents. So the incomes are going to be restricted at 30% of the income, and the incomes are going to be 50, 60, 80% of the area median income. So by its very definition, it is not going to generate the same level of income on a yearly basis. So what LIHTC or other sorts of financing that we're able to provide is, in this example, they reduce the debt that is actually necessary. So they take it from, you may need to have 80% debt in a market down to 30% debt in a fully affordable project. When you have that 30% debt, that could then be serviced by the restricted incomes. And this is it at its kind of most simplified form. I know there are a couple developers in here who are, probably this is, very remedial. So this is governed by the qualified allocation plan, which is it's a state regulation which sets the guidelines by which we allocate and we prioritize applications coming in for the competitive credits. It also sets the standards that have to be met. So these are building standards like green efficiency standards, affordability controls, et cetera. They're all governed by the QAP. We actually earlier this year just formalized the most substantive update to the QAP that we've had in probably about 10 or 15 years. We're also currently going through some supplemental edits that'll take effect for the 2025 rounds. So applications that are coming in this year will be under this year's QAP, and then next year we'll have some slightly further amendments to those. So I'm going to jump slightly forward here. This is just a kind of a sample calculation. You do not have to know this. I think the key thing when you're dealing with a 9% credit is to just understand when the credit pricing is taken into effect, it will cover about 70% of the development cost. The development cost is based by looking at your total costs, then you take your eligible basis, which are things under the IRS code that are allowable, It's then you wind up calculating it, your adjusted basis, your applicable fractions. So if it's 50%, you would, instead of timesing it by 100, you times it by 50. And then you wind up, multiplying it by your tax credit percentage, and it comes up to an annual amount. Now, the reason that this is really important is because the way, sorry, I want to jump back ever so slightly. The way LIHTC actually works is an application comes in, and an application comes in, let's say it's approved, the person is that development is awarded the tax credits. The credits are then syndicated, which means that an investor will come in and purchase those credits. What the investor gets out of that is they get to claim federal tax deductions for the next 10 years. What the project gets is it's a direct cash infusion into the project that's going to reduce that creates equity in, that reduces the number of the debt that needs to be sustained. The reason I want to show this is because when we look at a 9%, which this is kind of still not a great calculation, if you look at the same project under a 4%, all of a sudden you have a huge gap that comes in. Because it can only cover 30%, oftentimes for the longest time, our 4% were really only used on rehab deals or mixed income. The 9% were primarily new development. Now, when you can use a 4% credit for new development, and I apologize that I know this is a little dry. See, so for what it's worth, I actually also teach classes here, and I can tell when people are not paying attention. The reason that I want to highlight the financing gap is this is really important. Beyond the fact that the tax credits set all kinds of standards and affordability requirements that have to be in compliance with both state and federal rules. When you use the 4% credits, they're as of right, which means we're really only limited by the state's volume cap when it comes to these. The problem is you oftentimes have to find that $6 million that you don't need to find on a 4%. On a 9% deal, you get that, you pretty much can just go right ahead. Maybe minor adjustments, but you should be able to build almost out as of right with that financing. A 4% is much more difficult because there's a huge gap that comes in, which is the 30% in between what the tax credits are going and what the debt can mean. So in this example, it would be $6 million. In the past, that has fallen on the projects or the towns to fill those gaps. And so those might wind up being, out of your local trust funds, they might be out of county home funds, federal home loan bank loans, et cetera, deferred developer fees. You'd have to be really creative to put these together to make that gap work. I will say it is really thankful to the legislature, as good as Juan is walking back in, thankful to the legislature, over the last few years during the Murphy administration, they have authorized huge amounts of investment into affordable housing specifically geared towards meeting these round 3 obligations. So we've also looked at creating a hospital program, but the legislature has invested at this point hundreds of millions of dollars to serve as these gap fillers. So for the rest of this year and possibly into a little bit of next year, depending on kind of when the federal deadlines around ARPA funds have to be met, there is money to meet, to fill these gaps. That is the Affordable Housing Production Fund, which is, at this point a more than $400 million program that is being used to fill those gaps on new construction when it's in a fair share settlement agreement. There's the urban preservation, which means for certain municipalities that meet an urban definition according to those guidelines, they can actually find projects that are expiring or that might have deed restrictions that are expiring, and you access those funds to re-up, their affordability for the next 40, 45 years. And then there's the workforce housing, which is really geared towards mixed income deals. And the idea on that is that actually, it provides a direct cash infusion into the deal by actually buying down some of the market rate units into what would be workforce housing units or middle income. So these are things that are not covered by LIHTC, which is 80% or less, but are also really, you're restricting them at what are effectively, 100% AMI, et cetera. For what it's worth, the Affordable Housing Production Fund, to be eligible, a project has to be in a fair share settlement agreement plan or have a compliance cert. The urban preservation, the eligible municipalities in Middlesex are, and you might want to take a note, Carteret, Highland Park, New Brunswick, Old Bridge, Perth Amboy, and Woodbridge. Those are based, the workforce housing eligibility municipalities are Carteret, Cranberry, East Brunswick, Edison, New Brunswick, North Brunswick, Piscataway, Plainsboro, South Brunswick, South Plainfield, and Woodbridge. If your town wasn't in that second tranche, projects actually still could be eligible for that if they're within like a proximity of transit. So I think it's a quarter of a mile. So in short, the point I'm trying to get across with this is that this is going to be, we understand that this is a difficult process to try and build for you guys. We are here to help you. We're a state agency. It is our mission is to help you guys, to be a partner for you, to help you accomplish your goals. We have plenty of sources of funding. If the legislature authorizes more in the coming years, we have, we can very quickly get hundreds of millions of dollars out into programs that would be distributed to help you guys. I want you to take away from this that you guys are not alone as you're undertaking this, but to also, hopefully maybe turn what could be looking like, hey, we have to do this into, oh, we get to do this because there's funding available, and this funding could help you meet your goals, whether those are housing goals or whether you're using your housing to, spur further economic development, Main Street revitalization, or other, other kind of municipal planning goals. So our staff is here to help. We can offer technical assistance, financing, suggestions, and do review. I mean, really all you guys have to do is reach out, which I'll show right here. We have what's called our unified, our Uni-app process. It's right on our website. It's very, it's a complex process because there's tens of millions of dollars involved with each application, but it is as simple as could be in terms of being able to locate the various sources. So if you guys have plans, if you have projects that you are thinking may be eligible, or you want to see if they're eligible for any of our financing opportunities, they're not here, but I would definitely recommend you reach out to Donna or Laura Shield, Donna Spencer or Laura Shields with our staff. They are among the most knowledgeable on these programs in the whole state. They're wonderful, and it is in their interest for you guys or your development partners, whether they're for-profit, nonprofit, whatever, to submit completed applications, because it is a time crunch on us if non-completed applications are submitted. So, we want to see, number one, to help you guys so you're not wasting your time if you're not eligible, but if you are eligible, to make sure that your applications are submitted in final and complete form, it benefits everyone. Now, I want to slightly take a half a step back, because you might be thinking like, well, okay, so there's all these financing, what does affordable housing actually mean, right? The fact of the matter is, these buildings are already in your communities. The agency has been around, this is our 40th anniversary since our two predecessor agencies were merged. Over the last 40 years, the agency has financed more than 68,000 affordable units in the state of New Jersey across just shy of 1,000 projects. So if you're wondering where they look, the reality is they're probably pretty much all around you. In fact, in Middlesex alone, in Middlesex during the third round alone, the agency has financed more than 1,200 units across, I believe, 9 or 10 towns. So the applications are coming in. Your partners are submitting already. We're happy to help. We want to help you. And also, these are also what they look like, right? Camp Kilmer and Jacob's Landing are two of our larger, more recent examples of projects that have come through us for financing. Not to mention, also, sorry, I want to do a quick plug too, because on the Affordable Housing Production Fund, do we have anyone from Monroe here? Well, Monroe Veterans is one of those projects, and how about from Old Bridge? The Vistas at Old Bridge have also come through to get financing through some of these gap financing programs. So, and then even, I think South Brunswick, I forget which one has one as well, so I apologize that I didn't write down that name. So that's really it. And again, I'm really disappointed that I had to follow Reverend Dobson, because that just wasn't fair. But if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to help. I mean, I think I'm probably at time, so I don't know if you want to, I'll do questions afterwards, or just come find us. We'll be right over there. Talk to me if you have any questions about the multifamily stuff, or Jesse if you want to talk about our down payment assistance, or take some flyers back to your town.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. I want to recognize that Assemblywoman McCoy has joined us. Thank you for being here. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker directly from Middlesex County Department of Community Services, our division head for the Division of Housing, Community Development, and Social Services, Melissa Bellamy.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm here to talk about the funding options that the county makes available to developers to help you as a municipality meet your affordable housing obligation. So there are two main funding sources that the county has. One is the Home Investment Partnerships Program, and this is pass-through funding that comes from the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. So it's available at the county level. It's also available in our two large urban cities, New Brunswick and Perth Amboy. They get their own home funding allocations. And I have to commend the County Board of Commissioners because they have made a 15-year commitment so far to fund something called the Housing First Capital Fund, which is capital funds used to create units specifically for homeless households, individuals, and families as part of either standalone projects or units in a larger development. And where that is really important, I think if you already kind of know, it's tough to build affordable housing. It's tougher to build affordable housing for the people at the lowest income levels. So I want to commend the commissioners for making this possible and making that available. When you look at what's affordable housing, for a lot of people, it's not even affordable enough. So we don't even have it at the most basic level for people, all the people who qualify. And if you're at that lower level, at or below 50% of area median income, it's even tougher. So big commendment for them being able to do that and us being able to offer these programs. So I'll talk about Home First. The eligible activities you see there, pretty much anything you can do to create affordable housing. And I think what a lot of people, if they have that NIMBYism about affordable housing, is they're thinking, oh, you're gonna come in and build these big developments, and that's gonna ruin our town. And that's not the case. You can do affordable housing in a myriad of ways. Acquisition rehab, conversion of housing. So I wanted to highlight a couple particular projects that we did to show some of the examples. In the township of East Brunswick many years ago, I think probably close to 30 at this point, they had formed a nonprofit, the East Brunswick Community Housing Corp. And one of the ways they're addressed their affordable housing obligation is through a buy-down program. They buy condos, townhouses, and then they're able to, because they have the equity in them, to offer them at really reduced rents, below market rate rents. So they're already taking housing stock that's in their community. It's scattered sites. It's not like, oh, that's where we put the affordable housing. So that's a really great program, and they've been able to use home funds for several years, leveraging their own affordable housing funds. Reformed Church of Highland Park, another church that formed an affordable housing corporation, and they have done a series of acquisition and rehab of, again, existing housing stock that they turn over and rent to low-income people, including persons who are homeless. So that's a great example of a community putting their faith into action through their Affordable Housing Corporation, which is a nonprofit. Again, remember those bonus credits for your nonprofits. Community Options, Inc. is an organization that works with people with different developmental disabilities. And they've been able to use home funds to rehab their consumer homes to make sure that that housing stock will stay affordable for additional years, that they have a safe, stable place for their residents and their consumers to live. So that's another option for home funds, and it can, through rehab, you can meet your obligation as a municipality. Talking about conversion, we highlighted, the Reverend highlighted the one project with Reformed Church of Highland Park of turning, with First Reformed Church of New Brunswick and Town Clock CDC of converting their their worship space into housing for victims of domestic violence. There's been other conversions, one in Woodbridge by Ingerman to turn an old school into Reinhardt Manor senior housing with a build-on. So there's infinite possibilities if you have older, different properties that you no longer need, that, hey, there's ways you can convert them into housing. And the last project highlighted was a new construction by Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Metuchen that they did with the Archdiocese in Newark and a couple other partners to build senior housing on some old property location in Edison that they no longer required as a faith community. And what was really great about that project, it not only included home funds to make affordable senior housing, they also had a component in there to have homeless housing for seniors, which is a really critical need. And a shout out to HMFA with their low-income housing tax credit projects, because if you're not aware of it, several years ago as part of their plan, they put in a requirement for developers to have to provide, it pretty much boils down to at least 5 units of homeless housing in most of their developments. So that's been a great way that we've been able to address that and make sure that people at the lowest level and most vulnerable in our communities are having their housing needs addressed. So the Housing First Capital Fund is, again, you can do all the same activities you do in home, but it is for specifically the creation of homeless units. So it could be you're doing some homeless units in a larger project, or it could be you're doing a smaller scale project that is just going to be dedicated for housing, permanent housing for homeless individuals and families. Because you're creating, you can say, oh, well, here's some affordable housing for, that can, homeless people can stay there. Well, you kind of need to make sure the rents are really low for it to really be homeless housing. So we say they should be a voucher attached to that to make sure that family doesn't really pay more than 30% of their income, whatever their income may be, or that the rents are targeted to people at 20% of area median income. Again, some of the misnomers about homeless is that, well, they have no income. Well, that's not the case. Homeless people have jobs, they're in our community, they're working, they have income, they might have SSI, but that's not going to be enough to be able to afford a market rate unit here in the county. The county has a very collaborative homeless services system with all of our community partners and have something called coordinated entry, which is a system to prioritize people who are homeless for housing opportunities. And some of the factors go in as length of homelessness, disabilities, different needs, and you kind of compare it to an emergency room. It's a little different from a waiting list. You know, if we've all had the misfortune of being at an ER at some period of time, and I might be in the ER with my sprained knee, and I've been waiting, you know, an hour or so, but then somebody comes in with a heart attack. Well, they're getting seen right away because they're more critical need. That's how coordinated entry works. So someone who's unsheltered, maybe elderly, disabled on the street, might have an opportunity for housing before somebody who's in just a doubled up situation or maybe in a shelter. So we make sure that anybody who receives these funds is using our system to place the homeless people. So that also makes sure the prioritization is there, but it also makes sure for you as the developer or project manager, we're giving you already screened homeless people. And that works with all the funding sources at the state level. So it's a great way. And as was said before, you want to make sure the housing is connected and it's located in a good place. Is transportation nearby? Can people get food, shop, medical, schools? So what you want to do, and where these funds come into play, is that you can leverage them. We often are the gap for a lot of projects, and that's what we do. And you see some of the different funding sources here. We've talked about the tax credit ones, your own affordable housing funds as a municipality. But to put together a project, especially a larger scale, you're probably doing at least 3, 4, if not more, of these coupling together. So unless it's a really small project, you're using multiple sources. So we become that kind of stop where you can say, hey, here's a great project, but we need this much more in dollars, and can come and make a request and see about getting those funds. So it really is being knowledgeable about what's available at the state level through HMFA. There's also funds available through the Department of Community Affairs. There's funds through the county, your own municipal funds. So they all really have to work together to put together a project. And just a little bit about how do you go about this, because you're like, hey, this sounds great. How do I get this? And we do it in two ways. So we're going to ask for the same things that most other funders are going to ask for. You got to, let's show that you explain the project, what's your experience, give us your sources of funds and your budget. Here's the good news for you. We spoke about how HMFA has a uniform application. We kind of have even a step further than that. We don't tell you, fill out our piece of paper. Say, well, here's what we need of your development budget. Give it to us. But you can give it to us on the same form that you submitted to HMFA. Actually, we prefer that because we want to see that you're telling all your funders the same story. So we try to make it easy in that way that you're not having to fill out different pieces of paper, that you can use the same packet for multiple funding sources. And we also realize the commitment when you're trying to find affordable housing that nobody wants to be like the first dollar in. Everybody wants to be the last dollar in. So what we can do, we're required with our home funds by federally, we can't formally commit them unless all the other financing is available, but we can give you a soft commitment. We can say, hey, if you telling your bigger funder that, hey, Middlesex County is willing to give me X number of dollars, that might be helpful for you to get, 10 times as much funding as we're giving you. So we can give you a soft commitment through a resolution and say, hey, we like this project. We think it has a lot of merit. You go out and you get all your funding. We're going to put in this amount. So that's very helpful for some agencies, especially if they're applying for low-income housing tax credits. But if you already have everything you need and we're just the last part in, then we can go full commitment. Here's a resolution authorizing an agreement. Here's your funding. So we try to make it as quick as possible for you. Not always, we do the best we can on that, but we want to make sure to make the process not terribly difficult while doing our due diligence to make sure that your project is feasible to be built and sustainable for the period of affordability. So we don't want to see projects go belly up or have difficulty 5, 6, 7, 10 years in. And here's just the contact information for home and for the Housing First Capital Fund. It can be the main point of contact. If you're interested about that, similar to HMFA, if you have a project and you want to talk it through, come and talk to us, especially if you're looking at maybe combining both of those funding sources. Depending on where we are with either of those budgets and how much funds we have available, we might steer you in one direction or the other. And for the Housing First Capital Fund, we work in conjunction with Coming Home, which is a nonprofit that the county helped form several years ago to address affordable housing and work towards ending homelessness. And Francis O'Toole, who many of you might know, is also a contact point. So the county and Coming Home together examine all the applications for Housing First Capital Fund and make recommendations for funding. For home funding, it comes first to us at the division, and then we review it with a home committee made up of representatives across the county who have experience in building. So that's information about that. Know that the county has a strong commitment to helping you as municipalities create affordable housing in ways that is smart and it works for your community. It works for the people who will live there and for your residents. So thank you very much. I'll be available at the end for any questions, or you can always send me an email if you'd like to talk about a specific project in more detail.
Thanks, Melissa. Next, I would like to introduce the panelists for our panel discussion, Meeting Your Town's Obligation and Models for Success. We'll be hearing from experts at Habitat for Humanity, housing advocacy groups, and private social service organizations about successful strategies for meeting town obligations and creating affordable housing. Please help me welcome again Juan Carlos Nordello, Liz DeCourcy, Eileen O'Donnell, Frank Piazza, and Chris Folio.
So as our panelists get started, I just wanted to take the opportunity to read a brief bit of their bios. So Cristiano Foglio is the president of Community Investment Strategies, an award-winning affordable housing developer for over 30 years. CIS currently has 4,000 rental units meeting municipal fair share obligations. Prior to forming CIS, Chris was the executive director of the New Jersey Housing Mortgage and Finance Agency and served as chair of COA. She's also served as the past president of DevCo in New Brunswick and is credited with many of the formative redevelopment projects in the city. Can we have a round of applause for Chris? Eileen O'Donnell is the executive director of Coming Home of Middlesex County, the nonprofit created by the county to spearhead efforts to create a system to end homelessness in Middlesex County. Her 20 years of professional experience as a healthcare attorney and businesswoman, providing legal, business, and policy analysis service to the public, as well as private entities that she brought into this role, have served her well and enabled her to grow and develop the organization from the idea that it was when she assumed the role in April of 2011. She holds a BA in psychology, a master's in public policy from the Eagleton Institute of Politics, and a JD from Rutgers School of Law. A round of applause for Eileen O'Donnell. Liz DeCourcy is the CEO of Morris Habitat for Humanity. Recently, she served the interim CEO and chief operating officer and vice president of real estate for the affordable housing organization serving Morris and Middlesex County, as well as the greater Plainfield area. Throughout her nearly 20 years of service to Habitat for Humanity, Liz has demonstrated exemplary leadership, fostering collaboration among their staff, volunteers, and partners. And last but certainly not least, Frank Piazza is the president of Piazza & Associates. For almost 30 years, Piazza & Associates has been dedicated to the administration of affordable housing programs and the management of homeowner associations in New Jersey. While their concierge level management services are limited to Central Jersey, their affordable housing outreach spans the entire state. Round of applause for Frank. Hello? Everyone hear me? Okay. So I think this is obviously the most important part, and this is the panel discussion to really incentivize our municipal partners to understand what our nonprofit developers and nonprofit organizations can do for them, especially considering the incentives that are contemplated in A4. So we're going to hear from them. These are all experts in the field. Our first question, so you all represent different project types that could potentially help a municipality meet their affordable housing obligation. Can you describe the typical time frame it would take from contract signing to bring one of your projects to fruition and the major steps that are involved? Let's begin with Frank.
Thank you very much. Although the introduction was about Piazza & Associates, I got my start in the affordable housing business by being a part of the development of a 126-unit rental property, a tax credit property in Plainsboro, New Jersey. At the time, by the way, the equity was 45 cents on the dollar, not 95 cents on the dollar. But it was a great program. We built a beautiful community. And the key there was, in Plainsboro, was that this 100% affordable apartment community was built right in the middle of town, not on the other side of the proverbial tracks. Then I moved on at their request to Cranberry Housing Associates, another nonprofit, to help them do something different. They did more of a semi-scattered site development where they now own and manage more than 100 affordable housing units, and a lot of that with Middlesex County's home program and assistance. And in my administrative duties, I work throughout the state. And there I am not as much in contact with nonprofits, but with for-profit developers. All that to say that the time frame for developing, everyone knows, is very significant. And much the way, just the plan to get the numbers out is going to be a couple-year plan. Developing the actual affordable housing takes a lot of planning time. And so from start to finish, you might look at least 3 years, 3-year program. For the concept, moving to feasibility, to financing and the pro forma, and then to really flesh out all of the actual construction and development criteria. And then you got to think about, as I was reminded when we finally got Windhurst, the apartment complex, funded, and it took years, literally, to get the funding. And the gentleman from the funder said, "Well, now, how's it feel to get your funding and get everything signed?" And I said, "Well, you think it was like this great accomplishment, but really just the beginning of the whole development process." I hope that helps. I'm sorry if I rambled.
No, I think it really expresses the long-term nature of this and the importance of proactivity. Liz, do you want to add anything?
Sure. So similar to Frank, we use 3 years as an average for what it takes, but it varies wildly. We could be doing a single-family home or a 25-unit condominium complex. That one took 15 years. And that was mostly because it needed a cleanup, and the municipality was kind of going through consultants and trying to work with the DEP. So it does vary quite a bit, but I would say in general, we do spend a lot of time in pre-development. We meet with the municipalities, find out what it is they're looking to build there, what it is they want, what they want their town to look like. So we work ahead of time, and that's often even before we enter into a contract, before we want to see if it's going to make sense. And we have to already start planting seeds, talking to HMFA, DCA for funding, if the municipality has trust funds, because everyone knows if you don't have money, it's hard to start the project. So that actually happens very early on, just to see if it's feasible. And then we will go into the contract signing, and then we have typical due diligence activities like any other developer. And, I might put a 90-day due diligence period, but often with extensions if anything is found. And then again, we work collaboratively with the municipality, because often the property is owned by the municipality at this point still, if they're donating property. And then we will go on to the land use approvals, which in New Jersey, is lickety-split, and you're in and out of there, and you can start building right away. So we've done land use approvals in one meeting at the municipality, and it's great, and then you just have the 45 days. Other times we've been in a municipality, not in Middlesex County, that we went to 9 hearings, and then still got sued, and then still had to settle with the neighbors and the municipality. So I wish there was a typical. There isn't, but most developers that do what we do, especially in the nonprofit arena, we're not doing it for the money. We're doing it for our mission, and we'll stick with it day in and day out until we get those families into homes. Habitat does home ownership, but there's plenty of rental partners that we work with as well. And the other piece that's not often focused on is the present need, or the home repair portion of your obligations for municipalities. Habitat does that as well, and that could be as simple as just helping your residents with a grab bar or a ramp, something like that, to replacing a roof or a furnace. So that could be a one-day job, or it could span several months.
Chris or Eileen, anything to add?
For larger developers, it's 3 to 5 years. But I will tell you, we were the designated developer, not in Middlesex County, for a town where we were the designated developer for 22 years, and that project just went into development, and that was only 20 units.
Yeah, so Coming Home, I think, as it was described, we were created by the county to spearhead the creation of a homeless system. So we work very collaboratively with many service providers in this room and the county, so with the COC, Housing Continuum of Care. So we, as Melissa talked about, we administer the homeless management information system and the coordinated assessment system. So we had need nicely categorized, right? But the resources didn't meet the need. And so we were tired, back in like 2013, we were tired of just going to meetings and looking for vouchers. So we said, what can we do to catalyze the creation of affordable housing? So we're on a much smaller scale than Chris and Frank probably operate. But what we did is created a downstream LLC, and then we partner, we create joint ventures with nonprofit affordable housing developers. So those projects are a little bit smaller. So, I mean, I agree with the time frame. It's all dependent on the source of funding, so on and so forth. But I do want to say this. How many municipalities are in the room? How many people from municipal administrations are in the room? Good, good. And there's tons of other people here who are housing service or housing advocates or housing service providers. So I just want to sort of mirror what Reverend Dobson said, is what really can stall the creation of affordable housing is lack of transparency from the municipality in the beginning, right? So there was just a story in the New York Times in March of this year in Florence, South Carolina. The chairman of the council was all for affordable housing, said all the right things, and gave the go-ahead for a project. I don't know how their government works. That wouldn't have happened here. But anyway, and then the neighbors found out. And so not only did you not address the stigma of head on, you made it worse because you felt like you were trying to sneak something in, right? So people of lower income are people of lower income, right? They're not criminals, as some politicians in this day and age might suggest, but they're just people with lower income. Same with homeless people. There are homeless people, and that's our major focus. Homeless people there are some people with untreated mental illness and addiction, and there are plenty who just are low income, and really low income, so much so that they lost their homes. They lost their homes, they have a breakdown of their social network, and that's where they are, right? But this is an opportunity because our legislators just did a great job in reviving the affordable housing obligations in the state. They just did a great job, streamline the process, make it more affordable because you won't have to pay all those attorney fees. I'm an attorney, but you don't have to pay all those attorney fees for the fights and the settlement disputes. But so this is our opportunity now to do our obligation, right? We can't try to sneak it through. We have to, we can lift up our own communities now by, one family at a time, by we're housing these families. But we need to do that. We need to be forthright. So I say, and we can help with that, as many of the housing advocate agencies in this room can help with, is if you want to present this to your town council, we can help you. We can provide you all the data that all the untoward effects that were supposed to happen in Mount Laurel did not, and there's lots of other affordable housing histories like that can show that, your crime doesn't increase in your neighborhood, that everybody becomes, I'm generalizing, of course, but everybody becomes productive members of your community. So we can help with that from the get-go.
Perfect. And I think for our municipal partners in the room, it shows that there's different scales and sizes to a lot of projects that developers can undertake. So whether you're trying to meet a portion of your obligation through a developer or a larger portion, you do have plenty of variety and choices, especially as the experts up here mentioned. Next, we'll go towards innovation. So I think people are familiar with the different types of housing that are available throughout the state, especially as we're trying to meet our obligations and sort of the housing crisis that New Jersey is facing, creation of tiny homes, accessory dwelling units, and et cetera, to count as housing units. So for our panelists, do you see any types of innovation or different affordable housing project types that might be on the horizon in the future, especially concerning the lack of buildable space many of our municipalities are facing, and the desire to have housing located near transportation hubs or other amenities? I know there's some visual aids that our panelists would like to present here, so we'd like to begin with Eileen. Is that queued up from our IT? Eileen?
Yes, so that's basically what I explained in my last answer, is that we've created this program, and we do scattered sites. We don't do, 100 units, or we have not yet to date. I don't want to say that we may not, but we have done scattered sites in communities. So it's not, as Melissa said, that's where you put all the low-income people, or that's where you put the homeless people. You don't want to recreate the projects of the failed projects of the 70s. So that's what we do. We have seen an opportunity, which I haven't done yet, to create, because there's a lot of, not often we have been lucky in finding vacant land, and we've had some land donated to us so that we can build from the ground up. Otherwise, we'll refurbish, maybe one unit, and then we'll make it into a two-family house. So we've done those. So we've done small scattered site projects. But in the absence of available land, there is something that's brewing, is something called accessory dwelling units, and so ADUs. So right now, there's a state law pending, or a bill that is pending, that would create a uniform criteria for ADUs. But now you can still do it, but it has to be, and it widely varies among municipalities as to size, parking units, so on and so forth. But an ADU is someone who has enough land can build another unit on their property and rent it out. So it's good for the homeowner, because then it could be another source of income. It could be they give a lot of suggestions and saying, like, person aging in their house can move into it and then let somebody else move into the big house. So that's what they're saying. But it's also could be a solution for low income and homeless persons as well. And there's a town has to pass an ordinance, and they can set their own criteria for the time being. So that's an idea.
Perfect. And I think it also shows our municipalities from a native housing perspective. We're talking about new build here, but you can also make units that are currently native affordable by refurbishing, and there's credits for that as well. Chris? Let's see if I can get this to work. There we go.
I do have handouts if this isn't easy to see, but I just thought it might be helpful. We talk about labels of different types of housing and throw that around all the time. So these are examples of inclusionary, 100%, a rehab, and a redevelopment area. So to my left in the corner is a senior building with retail below. It was a redevelopment area for the township of Lawrence. I should say these are all 100% affordable projects, and they're all municipally sponsored, and they all have nonprofits as a partner with us in the development. That was a former motel that people didn't want in the town anymore, and a gas station. It was a DEP cleanup and is now the home of 65 senior affordable units and ground floor retail. One of the things that I always like to point out about this particular project is I've used senior housing as well as independent housing as economic development. That's what my background is in. This happens to be on a alternate Route 1, Brunswick Avenue in Lawrenceville, and there was a failing diner across the street. He has my picture now in the lobby when you walk in, because the blue plate special at 5 o'clock is now, you have to stand in line for. So I think you can pick as municipal officials areas of the town where you can use affordable housing to promote an economic development strategy. The property below is a before and after. It's local, it's Middlesex County, it's North Brunswick. This was a problem project where the municipality was really struggling with a current private owner. They really couldn't get compliance. This is a project where people were naturally low income. Unfortunately, that manager, would charge to have someone's toilet fixed. It wasn't a good place to live. They decided it really needed to be rehabbed. The town gave us $5 million towards the acquisition. I should have mentioned all of these were done in partnership with HMFA. This happens to be a 4% tax credit project, and that's where the $5 million from the Housing Trust Fund came in. To the top right, which is the very pretty photo, that's 100% senior project, also municipal sponsored, and town acquired the land. I think it's really critical, and I think we're going to talk later about what the municipality really has to bring to the table. That was a 9% credit. It did compete 3 times in the rounds, just to give you an idea of the other topic. To the right, the larger picture, though, I think is indicative of some of the things the Reverend asked us to think about, trying to be inspirational and aspirational with our housing. This is inclusionary development, and I picked it because I think it's it's way up there in Flanders, New Jersey, and it was done with Toll Brothers. We do a lot of inclusionary development, but in this particular project, you'll see that there's a municipal park as part of the component, and you wouldn't think of a very rural, suburban location to have something that actually was creating a community. And I think the things that always get me excited when I go to this site is the children of our development play with the children of the other development. There's a park in the center that creates community. And so I picked these examples because I do think that you have the opportunity, even with 100% affordable, to meet community goals first and the housing number second. So thank you.
You know, and I'd like to recognize Chris. I think she's been a real leader in the idea of an integrated community as we're talking about affordable housing. When we're placing folks near the amenities and the resources that they need to not only have a house, but to succeed personally, individualistically. And when we talk about innovation, we're not only talking about different types of units, which is obviously important, but we're talking about what the affordable housing can produce, which in this case, there's economic benefits to the municipality, social justice initiatives that can also be entertained there. So housing becomes much more powerful when this sort of innovative developer takes the lead. Liz?
Sure, thank you. And I was glad that Chris touched on the economic and the collaborative effort. We have in Morris County a couple projects, one where it was a long-term cleanup, but we partnered with the municipality. We put an easement and a walkway through our development, help them secure open space lands behind it to extend the pathway to where people in the neighborhood that we were building in could get to shopping and New Jersey Transit bus stops. So it was collaborative, it helped the community at large, and people often don't think of that with 100% affordable projects, so I appreciate you talking about that. So this property is 2 sixplexes. It is in Roxbury Township. It's the site of a former DPW site, and it's now 12 condominiums. We often, much like Chris mentioned, do a lot of remediation work and projects because, as everyone knows, affordable housing sites are not normally the best located properties. So we kind of turn that around and we specialize in that, and where others can't do it, we're at least able to layer the funding necessary, get the grants, get the donations to make it happen. So we'll often turn around a blighted site into something beautiful. And this is a redevelopment project. This is the site of a former Verizon repair garage. And we are proposing 31 condominiums. And again, there's an inactive railway line behind us. And working with the municipality, they want an access gate to allow people. It's going to be turned into a walking trail. And the design of our project in collaboration with the municipality is helping to redevelop and redesign the fabric of their downtown. So again, if you partner with nonprofits and you do it early on, we can help really kind of set the course of what the municipality wants to do in their town. And then this is a home repair project, one that I had mentioned earlier. So this house, the before is up on the left. I believe there were 3 or 4 generations of a family living in this house. It was right on a very busy street, and people passed by it day in and day out, and it was truly an eyesore, but people didn't really think about the people that lived in it. We were brought in by a resident that was looking to raise money to fix it, not even the municipality, but we came in and turned it around and made it this beautiful beautiful home. And these people were, like I said, they had multi-generations just trying to keep up with the mortgage to stay in their home, but they couldn't afford any of the vital repairs to make it safe and decent. So again, look for your nonprofits and other organizations to partner with to help.
And again, I think this sort of transformational aspect, a municipality can look at its underutilized land, its blighted land, things that were previously for commercial purposes that could be repurposed. You see a lot of municipalities across the state taking advantage of that tremendous development opportunity. It also helps to destigmatize housing in general when you're talking about innovation and economic repair that these projects can sort of contend with. So it's really innovative practices that our developers are doing up here, and I think they're doing a good job in selling themselves and the value of a partnership between a municipality and the developers here. So, for our municipal partners in the room, how can a municipality be proactive in searching for affordable housing developers like yourselves to potentially help address their obligation? We understand there's incentives to do so from the bonus credit structure that's contemplated in the legislation. And as developers, what do you expect and like to see from a municipality when you're engaging in these partnerships? So let's start with Eileen.
We would like to be brought in early and closely. What we have done with the Homes for All program that we created is two types. One is a push project and one is a pull project. So the push project is we'll locate the land or we'll locate the property and then we'll actually tee up the funding for it. And so we call that the push because we're pushing that to market. And so we will then approach the municipality in where we find the property. The other one is pull. So we say, just because we're doing this, and we're clearly a small developer, that we're doing this, that affordable housing developers are not going to be doing what they do, but please pull us in. So that's pull us in because we do use a lot of government funding and are quite familiar with the nuances of that. So we have been successful besides the Housing First Capital Fund with the state's Affordable Housing Trust Fund and what's the other one called, Francis? The National Housing Trust Fund, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the National Housing Trust Fund. And so Francis has become quite expert on that. So we can help you, even though we're not the developer, although we'd be happy to partner with you, but if we're not the developer, we'll still help you in a sort of consulting fashion to, maybe locate some more funding and help you with those sorts of applications. What we'd like to see from them is openness, transparency, and commitment, so that they can leverage their funds against the state funds.
Frank?
Yes, I was just going to mention that I'm a proponent of a really good municipal RFQ program where you do you find out who all the developers of the size and of the mission that you're looking for. And you can do that by contacting HMFA, for example, or Middlesex County. Send an RFQ, follow that by an RFP, whittle down the group to a couple of finalists, and then let the governing body make a decision as to what they'd like to see. But I think that promotes a sense of creativity, first and foremost. That don't give everybody the same building style and say, what would it cost you to build this? But, what do you envision on this site, like we were talking about before? What do you see as a contribution to this community by this development? And really utilize that RFQ and RFP process to generate, the best, most comprehensive, and the program that will meld into that community and contribute to that community.
Chris and Liz, anything to add on this particular note? Okay. Great. So again, I think that highlights some of what the municipality, openness, transparency, and sort of entering this partnership. For our final question, and this is sort of in preparation of this fourth round that we've been discussing, and the new process that's going to be undertaken. So for our panelists, if you were a municipality preparing for the fourth round, what would you be doing and what steps should you be taking now? Let's start with Chris.
So I really think that the towns need to be prepared to acquire property. So if it was me, I would be really thinking about what are the goals in your master plan? How do you want to incorporate this housing? But to Frank and everyone's comments here, talking to a developer first before acquiring the land, even if you're not choosing them, just we all go to informational sessions just to give you ideas. There are critical points in those 9% tax credits that Jonathan spoke about. And it really is that bad. I'm sorry. I love HMFA, but the process, not because of them, just because of the way the tax credit program works, is incredibly mired in regulation. So knowing that your land is going to be within a mile of a bus station and getting the points that you need is really critical before you start to acquire property or what the cleanup requirements will be. Right now, just to kind of give you a heads up, a lot of the issues that we're facing are really not under municipal control. Yes, your code officials we have to be nice and make friends, but DEP is really what we're finding the most difficult and time-consuming process. The changes in the stormwater regulations. So buying property or thinking about what land use requirements are not in your control and understanding that whoever you pick as a partner can get through that process. Your county utility connection fees, your negotiations with that infrastructure, in my opinion, is more critical now than it has ever been. So those would be some of the things that I think people should be prepared for.
Liz?
Yes, and to highlight the use of 100% affordable projects, I mean, I know municipalities, there are real challenges with infrastructure and cost and improvements that are necessary, but if you're doing 100% affordable versus an inclusionary project, you can get so much more credits for so much less impact with it. We often ask our municipalities, an ideal situation for us is come to the table with land and money. Come with the property and have trust fund dollars. And if that falls short in any way, help us get there. Be creative, bring us to the table early, like many of us has said. Good faith effort, and really share and collaborate on what you want to see, and use us more like a partner than anyone, that you're an adversary in some sense. We're doing this because it's our mission, it's what we do, it's the right thing to do, and our best partners are the ones that share those same values to help us get there.
Great. Frank, any closing thoughts on this? Good. Eileen?
Only to piggyback on what you said is that when we started this program, we weren't sure we should be in this space because you have affordable housing developers, you have social service providers, the municipalities, but what we called the financiers, which were the banks, which really didn't really want to play very much at all. But we went around and we did like a 6-month reconnaissance of everybody, and everybody said, no, you should be in this space because, the social service provider said there's never any money in any of these projects to provide services, and some of these people need services, and you get better bonus points if you're providing units for people with special needs. The developers said, yeah, you need to help us with the municipalities because it's so incredible hard to get through. So just that, we are here to help. That's our mission. That was the reason for creating Homes for Homeless in the first place, or Homes for All, so that we can help catalyze the creation of affordable housing, and we're at your disposal.
Great. And, that closes our panel conversation, but what I hope is that the municipalities have taken away, and everyone in the room, is the importance of partnership as it comes through identifying and addressing your affordable housing obligations. There is expressly incentives within the legislation to work with your affordable housing partners and nonprofit developers within this space. And I think you've seen from the remarks that each of them have given the transformational opportunity that is available for your municipalities in not only meeting your obligations that are mandated, but also you can really change the character of your community and achieve some of the ancillary goals that you have for your community vis-a-vis economic development or integration and other things. And again, this is about housing justice, and this is about your community and achieving its goals. So a round of applause for our experts here.
Juan Carlos, I just wanted to mention one thing. Jonathan mentioned it in his presentation, but many municipalities don't know of another category that's kind of newer in the conversation, which is mixed income. And mixed income, specifically under the HMFA, non-inclusionary, but mixed income, is for the missing middle. And so many of our communities have a tremendous need. I'm working on a project in Princeton, which are either, you can qualify for low income or you have to be a millionaire to buy housing. In their particular goal was to be broader than just the traditional 50, 60, 80% of median, but to really have aspirational goals to 120% for the missing middle. So that is something that can be considered in the fourth round. You won't get credit for it, but it may just make for a better community.
An important point. Thank you. And thank you to all our panelists. I'll kick it off to Ms. Davies again. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. Can you please help me give a round of applause to all of our presenters? Your presence and contributions were invaluable to the success of this event. Working together is essential in ensuring that the new legislation benefits everyone in our state. I'd also like to thank my colleagues from our Department of Community Services, the county event team, IT, and the college for their hard work in putting this event together. As a reminder, if you have any questions which were not addressed by the presentations today, please scan the QR code I talked about earlier on your agenda and submit them, and we will address those questions after today's event. So this concludes our event. Please visit our tabling area before you go. There are many resources to assist our municipalities in advancing affordable housing in our communities. So thank you and have a good rest of your day.